Welcome, everybody. I'm very happy to have so many people here. I can't say to see too many people, but to know that many people are with us. My name is Elisabeth Einwanger, and I'll facilitate and accompany this webinar. But I will not talk too long, and I will pass over the floor to Barbara Eklitis from SALTO for a short welcome before we go on.
Yeah, very warm welcome from Vienna, where the SALTO European Solidarity Corps Center is based. It's December, it's the last month of the year. It's the time where, at least in Europe, the days are a bit shorter, the nights are a bit longer, and it's time when we can look back on the year. What was this year 2022? And at the end of the year, many people also create some New Year's resolution. So we thought it's a very good time to also talk about solidarity and how we can contribute in the future. On the 20th of December, there is the International Human Solidarity Day. So we called out for the Solidarity Month. As a research center, we try to contribute all year long to shape the understanding of solidarity in inviting different experts, also invite people with different perspectives. So this webinar is also another attempt to give space to talk about solidarity and volunteering. And I'm really very, very happy and excited to have today two wonderful guest speakers with Gabriela Civico and Oliver Wittershagen. And I will just pass the floor because I'm excited myself to hear what you have to say. And I pass the floor to Elisabeth. Have a great webinar.
Thank you, Barbara. Okay, so thanks for everybody, and I will not talk too long either. I just wanted to express how grateful we are to have these webinars, to have so many people from all around the world with us. So it's from Africa, Mediterranean countries, Europe, Asia, Latin America, so from a very big community, but also from very different areas. So it's non-governmental, it's governmental systems, it's worldwide international networks, from private institutions. So also this knowledge bringing us together, I think is really fantastic to have with us. Yes, it's not my turn, so I will rather pass on. As Barbara already said, we have two fantastic speakers with a lot of knowledge connected to the topic for today on solidarity and volunteering. And we will invite Gabriela to start for an input. We will have a short 5 minutes in between to also think about questions and maybe to ask things already in the chat. And then we will invite Oliver for his input too. And afterwards, there will be some time for questions, for discussions, and for, diving a bit into this very interesting topic. For now, I will leave the floor to Gabriela. And thanks, Gabriela, for joining us. And I will spotlight you and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation, and welcome to all of you. And as Elizabeth said and Barbara said as well, such a great joy to see such a wide variety of people from different backgrounds, from different places. My name is Gabriela Civic. I'm the director here at the Center for European Volunteering. We are a European network of over 60 organizations all across Europe that work to promote volunteering. We take a very diverse view on what is volunteering. We focus on Europe, so that's what I will talk about. But in Europe, we do have a wide variety of cultures and traditions around volunteering, but we also have a wide variety as well of legal frameworks in different countries. And as a European network, we have to deal with all of those. And when we speak about volunteering, we have to speak in sometimes quite general terms, but also with quite an openness about what we consider to be volunteering and what we consider to be acts of solidarity. And we work really on the principle that volunteering is something that's done without seeking financial gain. So we do accept and we do encourage that in as many cases as possible and in different countries that volunteers are reimbursed their expenses. So it doesn't mean that if you volunteer, you should already be investing your own resources. You can receive a refund for your expenses, but you shouldn't be seeking financial gain when you are volunteering. And volunteering takes place for the good of others. It's something that's done for the common good, as we say, for the good of the community, for the good of society. Whilst recognizing, of course, at the same time that when we volunteer, we get something as well back for ourselves. And in fact, volunteering as a learning opportunity is something that we also focus on. We work a lot with the European institutions and other stakeholders around validation of learning whilst we volunteer. So something that's done without concern for financial gain, something that's done for the good of the community, and something that's done under free will. This is also very important. Volunteering should be a choice. It should not be something that's mandated by a government or by any institution, by an employer, by a school. In saying that, we do also take a very broad view, and we also work with service learning, for example. So when in formal education, students and young people are encouraged to experience NGOs, to experience what civil society is. And we call that rather service learning rather than volunteering, because usually that's compulsory. We also work with companies when they enable and encourage their employees to volunteer, often during working hours. So that's also something that we do as well. So as I said, a very, very broad view about volunteering. We do two things as a European network. One is to enable our members to learn about volunteering, to exchange, to grow together on volunteering issues. And with that, we do many European projects, mainly funded under Erasmus+, but also funded under the SERV program, the Citizens, Equality, Rights and Values Fund. And that's actually where we get also most of our funding. And we also do, of course, European Solidarity Corps projects and encourage our members to get engaged also in European Solidarity Corps. Within the Citizens European Rights and Values Fund, this year, but also in the past, we have focused very much on how to make volunteering in Europe more inclusive. Again, as I said, volunteering changes quite a lot from country to country based on traditions, based on cultures, based on legal frameworks as well. And we want to reduce any barriers that there might be to volunteering, but we also want to make sure that volunteering organizations are being proactively inclusive. It's not good enough, in our opinion, that organizations simply say, but yes, but anybody can join, without actually making any proactive efforts to look around them in their society to see if all members of different communities that they engage with are represented in their organization. Are facilities there for people with physical disabilities to volunteer, for example? But is there also outreach to different communities, to different minority backgrounds, people, or maybe to women or more men, depending on what the gender balance is in the organization? So focusing on inclusion within volunteering itself is a very, very important issue for us this year. We're also looking very much at how to help people, society, and policymakers understand that volunteering is not only about and is not only limited to task delivery. So yes, volunteers do things, and that's very tangible, and it's very easy often for policymakers and for society to understand what volunteers have done. Maybe they've delivered a workshop, or they have run a summer camp for children, or maybe they have built something, or maybe they have packaged some food parcels. You know, this is very tangible outputs that we can see. But what we also are focusing on, and what we want to focus on more at CV, is how can we help society and policymakers go beyond the idea of volunteers simply as service deliverers, but look at volunteering also for its deeper meaning in terms of what it says about our society, how we act on European values, how we act in solidarity with one another, how we defend, yes, our own rights, our own human rights, but how we defend the human rights of others through volunteering as well. How volunteering is a part really of active citizenship, of building community resilience, not only in a practical sense, but in the sense of linkages, human bonds, friendships, crossing the divide. People often tell us that through volunteering, they meet people that they would never have met through other experiences in their lives. And that is one of the things that they find very enriching about volunteering. But at its best, at its most inclusive, there are no divisions, there are no divides. You can have people of different ages, different backgrounds, different professions, different realities, all volunteering together. And that in itself, while not being the tangible output of the volunteering, is also very, very important in terms of what volunteering does for society. So we've been working, for example, with organizations about when they look to recruit volunteers. And last year,
Is it only my screen or?
No, I think, Gabriela, you are frozen. I don't know if you can hear us. That's the technical realities. I will stop the spotlight and wait and give Gabriela a second to rejoin, and for the rest of us to maybe start digesting. A lot of things Gabriela already started talking. I see you back, Gabriela.
Yes, sorry, you lost me. I'm sorry for that.
I will re-invite
the
you
gremlins
on the podium, and I hope it will work.
Okay, do you remember what was the last thing you heard me say? Just so I don't repeat or don't lose my track.
We just lost you a minute ago. So
okay, all right then. Okay, sorry for that. Sorry for that, everyone. These Zoom online things, it's wonderful that we can bring everybody together, but very often as well, the technical things get in the way. So I think what I was talking about was the idea of when we are recruiting volunteers, how we also pass the message that volunteers are not just labor, they are not just there to deliver a service, but they're also there as a very important part of solidarity, and a very important part of what we want to express about how we feel about one another and how we feel about the community and the society. So we work with organizations, with municipalities, with with companies, with national governments as well, to see how we are speaking about volunteering and how we're communicating about volunteering. And we're not just talking about it as a deliverer of service, but we are really talking about the deeper human rights component and solidarity component that volunteering has and the issues of social justice and bringing people together in the community of volunteering as well, and also tackling discrimination issues within volunteering for us is very, very important. We do that a lot as well. I mentioned the municipalities through the European Volunteering Capital competition, which on Saturday, actually, we will announce who is the winner for 2024. We have two candidates for 2024, which is Trento in Italy and Lviv in Ukraine. This year it's Gdansk in Poland, and we will be in Poland actually at the weekend for the closing ceremony. We will pass over to Trondheim, who is in Norway, and they will take over 2023, and then we will announce for 2024. You might be asking, or I would encourage you to think about, well, what is the criteria to become the European Volunteering Capital? How do we judge if a municipality is doing well? And I will just emphasize that this European Volunteering Capital competition, we are awarding what municipalities already do. So they are not asked, like in other competitions, to provide a program for a specific year, something special. We are really awarding on what they do now. And the guidelines are contained in the blueprint for European Volunteering 2030. And this is a document that we developed in 2021. It was approved 2021 by our members. And it contains all the guidelines that we think policymakers, but also society in general, and also volunteering organizations should be thinking about when they are developing volunteering policy. And those are the guidelines that we use to judge whether or not the municipalities are meeting the criteria. So are they empowering people and organizations to engage people in volunteering, for example? Are they providing resources? Are they providing funding? Are they giving visibility and visible support to the volunteers? Are they creating the civic space for the volunteering? All of these questions we are looking at with the municipalities and celebrating what they do, the good ones, and encouraging the ones who are not doing so well around supporting volunteering to do a little bit better. So the blueprint for European volunteering is available. It's available in several languages. And I think we can share that also with the materials after, if I'm not wrong, with all the participants who accepted to have their ID details, contact details shared. We can send you the blueprint, and we can send you the other resources. So I don't know if that covered a little bit, Elizabeth, some things there to think about, some questions we have about diversity in volunteering, about inclusiveness, about the deeper meaning of volunteering beyond delivering tasks. And these are some of the questions that we are addressing. But if there are other validation of learning, of course, as well. But if there are other questions, other things to explore, I'm here to explore them with you. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Gabriela, for a run through a lot of topics. I saw Manuel was raising his hand before, so maybe before we go for a quick just reflection moment, Manuel, you wanted to say something, so you're warmly invited to do so.
Yes, I do. I would like to talk about the disability people who volunteer, because we don't have any opportunity. And I, Asperger, I have the opportunity of work with Gabriela in his organization last year, 1 month, and this year, one week. And I'm still working with Gabriela. Thank you.
Thanks, Manuel, also for very important input on the possibilities for people with special needs, people with disabilities, also to join volunteering opportunities. As Manuel said, he's part of the CEV, where Gabriela is from and was sharing input. Okay, great. So before we go on, and there is another interesting topic and additional comments to share, I'm pretty sure, Oliver, that you have some more things to say. I would invite you just also to think of the many aspects we've been hearing about these last 15 minutes. And I would invite you to use the chat and share a word or a sentence that is still with you, or that was important for you to listen to, or was puzzling you maybe. And the invitation is open. Have a 2-3 minutes reflection moment, share a word, a sentence that popped up while listening to Gabriela. And so I can see some words popping up, some topics on inclusion, inclusivity. Volunteering is developing community resilience, friendship, social, very strong words that pop up and that you provoked, Gabriela, while starting this webinar. Working for people, doing good. When mentioning inclusivity, action speaks louder than words. So, lifestyle. A lot of topics already. So, I think, Oliver, there is a lot of topics that you might connect to, things that Gabriela mentioned out of your experience, out of the comments in the chat so far. So I'm personally very curious to listen to your experience, and I would invite you to present yourself. And yes, I'm ready and hope everybody's ready for the next interesting topic. And I will spotlight you to start with.
So that I can see my own face while I'm speaking. Thank you, Elizabeth. Wow, now 90% of what I had prepared for this webinar has been covered by Gabriela already, all the things about volunteering. So now I have to find a different spin and maybe connect it a bit more to solidarity. Let's see if I manage. So my name is Oliver Wittershagen, and I am here in Bonn, Germany. I'm a lawyer by profession, and I have worked in the area of international volunteering for more than 20 years now. I started as an international UN volunteer in Guyana for 2 years, where I was in charge of the UNV program. And then I moved to Timor-Leste in the same function before I joined UNV headquarters here in Bonn, where I was responsible for Asia and our programs in Asia and Southeast Asia, the response to the Indian Ocean tsunami, the response to the Pakistan earthquake. And we had a couple of support projects to national volunteer movements in Pakistan, China, and some other countries. So that's my background. I left the UN 4 or 5 years ago, and I'm a freelancer now where I support various groups. But now I'm actually back supporting UNV as an external consultant. So I'm a member of the pool of facilitators. And my main work there is to prepare young people for their international and also for their national volunteer experiences, either abroad or in their countries. And well, as I said, actually what I was about to talk about was to discuss the various notions of volunteerism, because I mean, about volunteering and volunteerism, you can write books. And if you have no other hobbies, you could even look into the terms volunteerism, voluntarism, and volunteering. And even there you will find differences. And the same is probably true for the word solidarity. And since there were some guiding questions for this webinar, I'm trying to make the connection between solidarity and volunteerism. And so I will just, shoot out 2 statements. One is solidarity is possible without volunteering. And the other statement is volunteering is not possible without solidarity. Or is it? We'll see. Anyway, so just for everyone to be on the safe side, as I said, about volunteerism and solidarity, you can find a lot of definitions. For the purpose of this webinar, we could say solidarity is an agreement of feeling of action, right? among individuals within a group, and it's about a common interest. That's what binds people when we talk about solidarity. And it's usually within a group. And what makes it so interesting is that in days of social media, you actually can have global solidarity, which is something that can be displayed worldwide, as opposed to maybe the time when I was young, the last century, where the only thing you could do was actually share your solidarity, in your communities, even if it was for activities that happened in completely different countries. And then you wouldn't know whether these people would even feel or see that you show your solidarity. That's different today, right? If we have issues in a country X, here in Bonn, we can have a demonstration of solidarity, and within seconds, it will be shown and displayed in the country of concern. The same thing we can say about volunteerism. I'm not going to repeat what Gabriela has said, but what I would like to state at this point is that there may be a difference between international volunteering and national volunteering. And I'm coming back to that. Now, first of all, volunteerism and solidarity, what binds them is that they are both rooted in some sort of altruism. That we can say. Also, they are manifestations of an intrinsic motivation. As Gabriela has said before as well, you cannot force people to volunteer. Although we know that there have been societies where that actually happened. And actually, we in UNV, we had a term for this. If people didn't want to come forth, we said, you will be volunteered. So that doesn't count. Free will, it's a manifestation of an intrinsic free motivation. Now, one thing I noticed, especially now when we have the Week of Solidarity, and when, for example, also UNV celebrated 2 days ago the International Day of Volunteers, which also had the theme of solidarity, very often these terms are actually used interchangeably. It doesn't really matter, but it's actually not really correct. Solidarity is not volunteering, and volunteering is not solidarity. And I would say, before you actually decide to volunteer for a certain cause or to volunteer for a certain purpose, you have to show a sign of solidarity first. There's something in your head that makes you think, okay, there is a situation where I would like to help. So you have the idea of feeling that you want to help, a feeling that you want to support before you act. And then the question is, how do you deal with this feeling of trying to show solidarity with others? And here you can have symbolism. I don't know, as you know, and I'm not interested any longer because Germany lost, but there's the FIFA World Championships in football right now. And there was a huge debate about the One Love armband of the captain to show solidarity to human rights, a no-brainer really, but still it became a discussion, right? So they wanted to show solidarity and it would have been a symbol. It's not volunteering, but it's a symbol. Another way of showing solidarity could be activism, demonstrations, for example, to show solidarity to a certain cause. And then there's this third area, how you can show solidarity, and that is when you translate your feeling of solidarity into practical action. And that can happen through volunteering. And that happens very often through volunteering. And I think there was one question that was guiding us for this webinar, that was, how does volunteering influence or structure solidarity? And I think that is indeed one way. You have an idea, you want to show that you're feeling with others, that you want to support others, and you want to go beyond symbolism, activism, activism in terms of demonstrations. You actually want to help. And that is where volunteering comes in. Well, does that mean that volunteering is an act of solidarity per se? That was the second question. We will see. One issue that I have come across in my 20 years was, especially when it comes to international volunteering, if it's not structured in a certain way, there is a risk that this goodwill, this show of solidarity, can hinder development rather than support development. And I have seen this very clearly in some of the tsunami-affected countries around the Indian Ocean, where in Sri Lanka, for example, there was an influx of young people from all over the world who wanted to help. And very quickly, after the first couple of weeks where every hand was needed, it turned out to be almost chaos. And the governments of Sri Lanka didn't really know how to deal with this influx of young people anymore. There was even a term that was created for it. It was volunteerism. I don't know if you have heard about this. And that is actually a very sad thing, because people came to help because they really felt and wanted to help. But then because there was not immediately a structure in place to make sure that all these people who wanted to help can support in an organized way, it turned into a problem. And this is where, again, formal volunteering comes in. So it took a few weeks before organizations like UNV and others were able to then offer their support to the government and organize and structure volunteering. And then you still had international volunteers supporting, but this time within the framework of the government, within the framework of NGOs, within the framework of the United Nations in an organized way. And by doing so, you opened the door to actually also include nationals of those affected countries to volunteer, which is a very important thing, because only this way you actually achieve some sort of sustainability. Because at one point, internationals will leave again, and then you have to make sure that you have supporting systems that support nationals to work in their own communities. So the answer to one of the questions, how does volunteering influence solidarity? Through structure, through a formal way of providing opportunities to volunteer. Then the second question that I had just talked about already was, is volunteering an act of solidarity per se? Theoretically, it is thinkable to volunteer without wanting to help. And that is, and Gabriela mentioned that as well, there's the reciprocal element, and there's also the element that you are doing something because you want to get something back. And I will never forget the discussion that I had with my mother many, many years ago, when she was one person who really liked to give gifts to people. And me being a teenager and an adolescent, I wanted to be smart. And I said, you're only doing it because you are so happy about them being happy. And she was very, very upset about that. Because what I was saying was, you don't really care about, the people that you are giving the gift to. You just want to feel happy when you see their happy faces, right? So philosophically speaking, it is possible to volunteer even without this intrinsic motivation. Does it really happen? I don't think so. And agencies like CEV or also UNV, we make sure that people do understand why they are volunteering, especially when we send them through our organizations in different countries. So another point I wanted to stress, and there is a person from the Murdoch University in Perth, Australia. His name is Peter Devrer. He actually worked for UNV a few years back as well. He has written a PhD thesis, and the title was International Volunteers, Cheap Help or Transformational Solidarity Towards Sustainable Development. And there's a lot to be read in this thesis. It's very interesting. It's very thought-provoking. But what he was saying is that, and I'm quoting here, the notions of volunteering as building solidarity and empowerment and supporting local ownership and values may also be regarded today as capacity development. Most of the work of the United Nations is around building the capacity, right? And what he is trying to say is, without solidarity and without empowerment of the people that you are supporting, there won't be any capacity development. And I think that's a very important point. And if you then connect this solidarity to the notion of volunteering, then you have a very powerful combination. And I think in today's development work that is outside of volunteering, this notion is missing sometimes. And I think that's why it is so important that we do have organizations like CEV or like UNV and others in this field that are actually providing the opportunity for people to volunteer in development and not necessarily see it as a job or as a profession. So one last thing I wanted to add, since we are in the week of solidarity and since we have just celebrated International Volunteer Days, there's this one point that I have read also in the thesis by Peter Deverer. There is a risk that especially international volunteering, when people from the so-called West go to the so-called global South, there is a risk that there is some notion of paternalism in there, right? People go somewhere, they think they know, they want to help, but they also expect that the people that they meet want to be helped and supported. And this expectation very quickly can change into something that I would call paternalism, right? And I have heard young people say, you know, the people I was supposed to help, they were not very grateful. And what it was in the end was a lack of you know, intercultural understanding and a lack of experience in working interculturally. And again, here the notion of solidarity comes in, because you want to do this, you want to do your volunteering help because you feel for the people that you are supporting. So you have a human connection, and that is why solidarity is so important when it comes to volunteering. So I have a few quotes. Since we are in the week of solidarity, our Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, he says, through their selfless service, volunteers show the best of humanity. They are true champions of our work to advance peace, sustainable development, and human rights. Today and every day, let us take inspiration from all those who, through acts of solidarity, large and small, improve our world. The UNDP administrator, Achim Steiner, also mentioned solidarity in connection with volunteering. He says, volunteers are not only building a better world for tomorrow, working in solidarity with communities, they are building a better world today. And then UNV's executive coordinator, Toili Kubanov, he likes to be very short and crisp. He says, volunteerism is where compassion meets solidarity. So while I was saying in the beginning, volunteering may be possible without solidarity, the answer of this little intervention should actually be volunteering and solidarity need to be together. Otherwise, we will not have the full potential of these two. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Oliver. A lot of very interesting, but also thought-provoking comments and remarks. And a good connection to what we've heard. Again, a lot of ideas and a lot of different focuses mentioned. I would invite you to use the chat and to share with us maybe a word, a sentence, a comment, a thought that you take with you, or that still, you know, is in your head, and share it with us in the chat some few minutes, and then we'll have, of course, an opportunity to discuss and ask questions. But first of all, maybe a short reflection moment. What do you take with you from these last 15 minutes talk? And as I can see in the chat, a lot of topics popping up also on the connected to the quite provocative thoughts that you were mentioning, Oliver, and also connecting to the input from Gabriela, connected to reciprocity. The connection on the global north, global south, volunteering, connected to the big topics or the recent years disasters, let's call it like that. Feeling of solidarity, practice. So not a lot of thoughts that are shared in our chat. So thanks for that. And I know it's a lot of topics that have been mentioned in a very short time, and I think it's still quite a lot of topics that we will take with us also to think about. Again, the volunteering instead of volunteerism that you were also connecting to. Okay, again. And I hope you can follow the chat and see the very interesting comments popping up. And while there are still thoughts and comments there in the chat, I would maybe go on, because I'm pretty sure there will be some questions or remarks, and the opportunity to maybe connect the two inputs we had. And I would invite Oliver and Gabriela on our virtual podium once again. And the floor is open to questions, to remarks. The easiest, we will observe the chat. It's also possible to raise your hand and ask the question. So however you feel comfortable with. First of all, I will invite Gabriela and Oliver. And there we go. There's Gabriela and Oliver. So back on our podium. And maybe Gabriela, I would start with you, because you started, and maybe there is something that you could connect with, and then you can react to what Oliver said after you, and maybe that's a good starting point for our discussion.
Yes, very, very happy to. And thank you, Oliver, for, yes, we didn't have chance to coordinate in advance. So I think we did quite okay to bring the different aspects in. So thank you for that. I think one of the most interesting topics, and I didn't mention all the topics that we're working on in my introduction, it really is quite vast. But the question of this idea of voluntarism is something that we have been exploring over the years. It is a booming industry. Many people either want to volunteer while they are abroad on holiday, while they are abroad traveling, and many people do want to travel to other places to volunteer. One of the principles that we always take from CEV, and that has a lot to do with the wide variety, as I said in the beginning, of interpretations, understandings around volunteering in Europe, is that we don't, in general, come from the aspect of you should do this, you shouldn't do this, and give this kind of advice. What we come from is from the point of view is trying to empower people to make better decisions, to try to be more informed, and we try to do this on volunteerism particularly, because we do have some models where people do go to other countries, for example, to work on restoration of cultural heritage sites where the local people don't have the knowledge, they don't have the skills, they don't have the interest maybe, and only with people coming from abroad in to do that kind of restoration, it builds up some kind of local community energy. And I agree very much so that it's not good when people go to other countries and then leave a vacuum. There has to be something done in collaboration with the local people. But this discussion around volunteerism is particularly, I think, interesting and important, and particularly when we talk about people's wish to do acts of solidarity, people feeling that they want to help, that they want to do something. And what we try to do is advise people to stop and think, do these people really want your help? Do they need your help? Do you really have something to offer? And then to maybe make better decisions based on answering a few questions. So that is what we try to do, is lead people. But I think some tourism is not. There are many NGOs who like to have people from other countries coming to help them and do different things, but it has to be informed. And just to say, I saw Julia there mentioned about intergenerational volunteering. And of course, this is another aspect, very, very important. And solidarity between generations through volunteering is also essential in our view.
So as you already mentioned that Julia was writing in the chat that she misses the concept of intergenerational volunteering. Is there anything to add on, maybe also Oliver from your side, or?
Yeah, I mean, UNV has programs for young people, and UNV also has programs for experienced people, and I mean, I'm almost a senior as well, but for senior people as well with a lot of work experience. And one idea is, of course, to connect these in teams. So it could either be international senior volunteers combined with international young volunteers, but more often it's actually international experienced volunteers combined with national young volunteers in the country where this person is going then. And there's then, of course, a very direct transfer of skills and knowledge happening there. And UNV started it only a few years ago, but the program is growing bigger and bigger, as far as I know. I just wanted to make one more statement regarding the volunteerism. I did not want to say that people go to those countries only because it is a nice country, like in the case of Sri Lanka, for example. What I wanted to say is that when the first urge to help has disappeared after a few days or a few weeks, and that is for various reasons, sometimes because it is very, very difficult to work in a post-disaster environment, and secondly because the interest is disappearing, then there is a risk, if this sort of volunteer support is not structured and embedded in a structural way, that you then have people who are hindering the work more than they're actually supporting it. So I did not want to say that people go to other countries only because they want to go as a tourist, but it's also nice to get the trip paid and then volunteer a little bit. That's not what I wanted to say.
Yeah. Thanks for the comment. The floor is open. Are there any comments, questions, connections? Manuel, I can see your hand up.
Yes, I would like to talk about senior people, about the thing has Oliver talked about senior people, volunteer.
Okay, well, I have one example from Timor-Leste. In 2003 or 4, I don't remember, they had the first census as an independent country. And of course, the National Statistics Office was not really, I mean, there was not many people working there. When Indonesia left Timor-Leste, many skilled people were simply killed. So there was really a lack of capacity there. And so then at that point, it was UNFPA who was responsible to support the national government in the census. They were wondering how they can bring in experienced people to support the national authorities. And what they asked UNV what we could do, because they wanted to have experienced people who actually have the time to come for 3 months. And that ruled out everyone who was working in any government anywhere in the world. So what we came up with was the idea to have retired statisticians and census specialists. And so we actually had an agreement with the government of New Zealand. And so they brought in 15 to 20 specialists in the area of census from New Zealand. And the youngest, I think, was 67 and the oldest was 81. And that was the first time that UNV had actually, with purpose looked for people that had already been retired. And that opened the door for the whole idea of having, whatever you want to call it, senior volunteering or experienced volunteering. And of course, it was a big success, and it was also highlighted very well.
Thanks for this additional broadening up also the topic on volunteering and the generations, inclusivity connected. I see there is a question in the chat from Ina about connecting international volunteers to those who will be after them, local ones. Are there any insights on how to implement it, right? Is it through direct collaboration only? But what if all internationals leave before enough or any locals can get the training? So I think the question is open to both of you. Anybody who wants to start? Or huge topic too.
I think, and Oliver knows much more about this field than me, but from our perspective, it would always be better that international volunteers go and join where there are already local volunteers operating. I think it's quite a rare situation where it's only the international volunteers who are going in and first of all starting the volunteering. It would be quite Timor-Leste, I think, is a good example where the skills were really lacking. But in other places, it's more about international volunteers reinforcing what the locals are already doing, and not the international starting something and then locals coming in behind. So I think it's if international volunteers are going to a place where there are no local volunteers already, I think maybe the situation should be reviewed from the first place. Mm-hmm. I don't know what you would say, Oliver, but to me it seems a bit the wrong way around.
Yeah, I have nothing to add. Unfortunately, it not always happens this way, but that is how it should be. Indeed, you should think the whole assignment from the end. You should know how you want to build the capacity of the communities or whichever area you want to work with, and only then even consider having someone coming from abroad. And very often it's probably not enough to have one person come for a few months. You will probably have to think about a chain of people coming in to really make sure that there is sustainability in the whole approach. The only exception are disasters and post-disaster situations where you need every helping hand. There maybe it's not that important. So again, I can only speak about my experience with UNV. So for many years we only had international volunteering, and then I think in the mid-90s we started to think about national volunteering as well. And at the beginning of introducing this national volunteer program, we always had national volunteers work in tandem with international volunteers to make sure that there is a transfer of skills. To be honest, I don't know 100% how it is today with UNV, but that is at least how it started. And in this case, I cannot agree more with Gabriela that you have to think it from the end to make sure that people don't, because that is very frustrating when people leave, and then what's next? That question has to be answered. Otherwise, you have not been successful.
Thanks for the comment. I think it also connects a lot what you said before on the structure has to be there. And it is important to frame and to structure volunteering and solidarity. And I think it connects a bit to what you were talking before too. I think there's people who want to participate in programs, as far as I can see in the chat.
I can maybe, so from Algeria, maybe Barbara is best placed to tell us if in European Solidarity Corps Algeria is possible. I'm not sure. The only other thing that I can think of is, of course, there are many online opportunities now. Even UNV has online volunteers as well, but there are many programs for online volunteering that you can do from anywhere. And for the other question from Camille about Romania, will be the first project. Maybe you can just clarify, is it European Solidarity Corps project or a different program? And I think to be more informed, I would hope that the people who are managing you, coordinating you, hopefully you have a mentor, hopefully they can look at the situation for you. But I think what would be interesting is to look at the legal framework for volunteering in Romania. And I'm quite happy that you contact me about that. And just to see that there is no question of replacement of job or any kind of exploitation, and that the volunteering is done in the proper way. But hopefully the project that you're volunteering with has already checked this out. But otherwise, you can also do your own due diligence, and we for sure, and also our member in Romania can also help you with that as well.
Thanks. Very practical advices and support. And Barbara, we will also share a website at the end, and then also for the where to have more information. So maybe there's also a good opportunity to start with and search for opportunities.
If I may, I would like to say one more thing. You know, very often people confuse volunteering with helping, but not in a professional way. And I think we haven't really used the word today in the webinar, despite the fact that we used many words to explain volunteering. But volunteering is professional. And I think it's organizations like CEV and also UNV who make sure, who really ensure that they send people who understand what they are supposed to do and what their tasks are. So their contribution is professional. And I think that's very important to say, because all too often you hear people saying, they're only volunteers, even within the UN context. And that is not correct. And I think all of us that are working in the area, we have to make sure that we remind people that it's not a discrepancy between volunteerism and professionalism.
Yes, thank you. You were right. The topic of helping was not talked too much for today. Okay, another very practical aspect connected from Ina. Any other questions, comments, remarks, thoughts? Barbara.
Yeah, as both of you, it's a question, an open question to both of you, because you're very experienced and you have seen the volunteering field for a longer period. I would like to know from both, with your specific perspective, what kind of trends do you see? You mentioned a bit the intergenerational. I know it was once part of the EU programs. There were programs who supported generational, intergenerational volunteering. You mentioned digital volunteering. What kind of other trends do you see on the volunteering solidarity horizon?
I can go if you like. So I think what we've seen in Europe, and it was happening before the COVID pandemic, but it certainly speeded up during COVID, was a shift from what we would call role volunteering to task volunteering. So in the past, we can make a generalization. One of the unfortunate things is we don't have really a lot of data on volunteering in Europe. This is really unfortunate. So a lot of what I'm saying is very kind of general, anecdotal, what we see. But we see that people have less predictable lives now. People are not in the same job, in the same career for a long time, especially younger people. They're maybe working on the platform economy, gig economy. They don't know when they will be working. Very difficult to fit volunteering around their lives and their career path. So whereas in the past, when people had more stable lives, they would sign up to be a volunteer for a particular role. What we see now is a shift that people will sign up to smaller tasks. So they will not agree to be the treasurer for the organization anymore, but they will agree to do the accounts for 2-3 months. So they're really moving from this role idea to this task idea. So this is one trend that we see. We also that was speeded up in COVID as well, because people's lives were even more precarious, and even now, if we can talk about post-COVID, that continues. The other thing that we see in Europe is that before COVID, there were a lot of older people volunteering, particularly in social care, in social services, helping people who are isolated, helping people with practical needs of food and caring and these kind of things. Those older people have not returned to volunteer post-COVID. So whereas during COVID, the young people stepped in because they were not working, they were not studying, they had time. Now the young people have gone back to work, they've gone back to study, they're doing other things. In Europe in general, and in some countries in particular, there is really a vacuum where the older people have not come back. The nations have not adapted the roles, the tasks to involve these young people. And we are really in this transition period between generations, between what's on offer in terms of volunteering and what the actual target group, the often younger people, can actually engage with. So I would highlight these two trends that are very active now in Europe. This has not changed, but the ability and availability to volunteer is perhaps changing.
Thanks, Gabriela. Sometimes your connection is a bit freezing, but I hope that we we managed to hear everything. And sorry for interrupting, Oliver. Your turn.
No, I don't know if this is a trend, but there is one element of volunteering that we have not really discussed today, and that is participation. So when we talk about volunteering, normally we talk about a one-directed help, support system. And that is important, and it's good that we have that. But what I have seen in my time with UNV in some of the countries that I was responsible for was that volunteering was a good way for people to participate in their own development, in decision-making processes of local communities and so on. So this way, people were able, through volunteering, to involve themselves, to make sure that their voices were heard, that decisions were not taken above their heads. And so their first motivation was not necessarily to help, but to actually to be able to participate. And that is something that I think happens more and more in many countries where you have communities where people are not included in decision-making processes. I saw one question in the chat that was asking whether there is a difference between international and national volunteering when it comes to the intrinsic motivation. That is a very difficult question. Or let's say the question is easy. The answer is difficult because it would be difficult to generalize. But my feeling or my observations has been that the sense of solidarity and the sense of wanting to help and wanting to make a difference is probably stronger and more resilient in volunteers that help in their own communities than in volunteers that are going somewhere else to help. And that does not discredit the second group, but if you're asking me whether I have seen a difference, then that would be my answer. And hence the importance of always making sure that when international volunteers go somewhere, there is this clear connection to the communities to ensure that whatever action is taken in that community, is in line with what people really want, so that it will be sustainable. So that I have observed. Maybe Gabriela, I'm actually one thing that I noticed in Germany is that for some people it's almost a sign of weakness to volunteer, to work without asking anything in return in terms of money. That I have seen quite often, and my feeling is that unfortunately with the younger generation, this seems to become more and more in a country like Germany. I don't know if anyone else has observed that. If that is the case, then I have to say I would be a bit worried. So it kind of says people who are working without wanting money are not intelligent enough or are not understanding our system or whatever it is. And if that is a trend, and I haven't decided myself yet whether I have observed it enough, that would worry me a bit.
Do you want me to respond, Elizabeth?
If you have a view on this, or if you
Well,
have observed it yourself, I don't know.
Just to say, I find that worrying. I hadn't heard it from. My screen frozen again. I hadn't heard it from Germany, but certainly in Central and Eastern Europe and what we could call kind of post-communist or post-socialist countries where there was this forced volunteering.
I think, Gabriela, you are frozen while answering and trying to comment on Oliver's comment while we're talking about trends and changes, maybe. So maybe meanwhile, Gabriela, I don't know if you're back. I saw you moving, but not completely. Maybe, Oliver, there was another question in the chat right after the national and international topic on vulnerable groups, if they are equally up to volunteering in comparison with the ones who are not considered vulnerable.
Okay, I was muted. Why would that be a difference? I'm not sure if I understand the question. Why would there be a difference between you know, vulnerable groups to volunteer on not vulnerable groups to volunteer?
I put it the question because I don't know, I just see it around me and I have this question in my mind. Let's say people who doesn't have too many resources in terms like basic resources.
Mm-hmm.
Do they have the enough intrinsic motivation to go and support others while their basic needs are not covered?
Yeah.
Like I don't see it too much in my reality, so that's why I'm asking. Maybe in your reality is different.
Yeah. Well, with this question, we would be leaving the area of formal volunteering, and I think we would go more into the area of informal volunteering. There are sociological studies that actually would say even the opposite, that would say that people in vulnerable situations, people who, and now, of course, we would have to define how vulnerable are the situations. So if you have to fight for everyday food, then that would be a different thing. But there have been observations that people who are in difficult circumstances may even be more have even more intrinsic motivation to help each other than people who are very well off. So that is an argument that you can make. But again, it would depend very much on how vulnerable you are and you know, to what extent you really have to fight for your everyday survival, because the worse the situation is, then of course the more difficult it would be, of course.
Yeah, very broad topic again. Gabriela, nice to have you back. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry for that. Zoom gremlins. No, just to say on the trends and people not volunteering because it seems somehow stupid not to work for money. This is certainly a trend that we've seen in Central and Eastern Europe. It's a legacy of the forced volunteer times. I hadn't heard that this was a case in Germany. So if this is drifting across Europe, then this is of course a worry, and we will look at that. But certainly that's why we call on particularly governments and the media to talk positively about volunteering, so that especially young people don't get the wrong idea that they are being exploited, that they are stupid if they volunteer. Mm-hmm. It's very important that we have these positive messages around solidarity, around volunteering. This is essential as well. On the question in the chat also about the average age of volunteering, somebody said they think it's 18 to 30. The last data I saw, and we don't have a lot of data on volunteering in Europe, but that the kind of average or most biggest group of people volunteering is actually men in their 40s. And this is mostly related to the huge number of particularly men in their 40s who volunteer in sports organizations. This is one of the biggest sectors, the biggest fields across the whole of Europe. So if we speak about averages, that's where the data points to. But of course, a huge variety of people volunteer from different situations. So to answer Maria's question, there is some interesting data, but really coming from the UK about vulnerable people volunteering. And you can certainly look at, if we come back to the idea of solidarity, when people are donating money, poorer people donate a much larger proportion of their income to causes than richer people. Proportion of income, not amount, but proportion of income. So that says something about the feeling of solidarity that people in vulnerable situations have with others who are also in vulnerable situations. And I think this is very inspiring and hopeful for us that people do have this deep sense of solidarity, even when they are themselves in vulnerable situations.
You know, I read one argument why that could be, and that was that successful rich people think that they have done it on their own, while vulnerable people always feel that it happens to them and that they're sitting in the same boat, so to speak, and therefore support each other. And I don't know if there's proof for this, but I like that argument.
There's also, if you see the chat, there is some comments also on volunteering, also what you were discussing right now on the vulnerability, but also on what is volunteering, and the students don't even know the concept of volunteering. There was a comment on Albania, where people were forced to volunteer. So also this spin we were talking about, where volunteer had to maybe, or how does it seen connected to trends, if it has to be a kind of a remuneration for it, or if it is something that, or if it has to be the acknowledgement has to change, maybe, so that maybe also turns around this topic that you were discussing right now.
Can I respond to Camille? Is that okay?
Of course.
Just so that we don't have confusion on the thing. So I don't know if it's she or he actually, but volunteering is considered something that is done without expecting anything in return. But don't you think it's normal at least to provide food and accommodation? I think because you are talking about accommodation, maybe you are talking about the full-time volunteering service model. But if we talk about any kind of expenses in general, I think the key is that when we talk about the principles of volunteering, we talk about without expecting gain. So, you know, if you've made an expense and you have your expenses covered, of course, that's normal and that's perfectly fine. What we're speaking about is when you gain something on top of, you know, what you have already spent. But of course, in many organizations, they don't have the facility to provide even, you know, travel expenses or these kind of things. And again, coming back to what I said, what we think is that information is the key, that there should be transparency between the organization and the volunteer about what they can expect. But of course, covering of expenses is not the same as gaining financially. There's a real big difference between the two.
In UNV, it's called the living allowance, and it's established based on duty stations. But there's also an interesting observation there, because a certain living allowance to, let's say, live in Dili, Timor-Leste, for someone coming from Germany doesn't seem to be high. But for someone coming from, you know, the Philippines or Indonesia, it's actually a lot of money, and they manage then to send money home. And so immediately you are again in this discussion, you know, is this really a living allowance if you can afford? But you cannot make a distinction between someone coming from Europe and living in Dili and someone coming from Asia living in Dili. You know, it's there's all these questions that pop up, you know, once you think about it a bit more. And that makes international volunteering, interesting. I don't know, there has been a discussion again in Germany over the last couple of years, whether it's actually still okay to be involved in international volunteering. I don't know to what extent you hear about that as well, Gabriela, but I don't know how successful it was for the people who didn't want it anymore. but that has been an issue.
Yes, there's a big question, and there's a question now, and sorry not to put anybody on the spot, but with the humanitarian aid strand of the European Solidarity Corps, which is a one-way street, which is only sending people from Europe to the rest of the world and doesn't provide any facility for volunteers from the rest of the world to come and show solidarity with us in Europe and help us in Europe. There's no sense of reciprocity in the European Solidarity Corps for the humanitarian aid. And this has been met with quite a lot of astonishment and disappointment. That you know, in this year, you know, in the 2020s, we are still talking about this kind of idea of Europeans going out to save people, to do something, and not having this reciprocal global you know, solidarity between all of us. Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of people are questioning this and are thinking about you know, what are we really doing, you know, going to these places, and that's good to have some discussion, to have some debate, and not to be, you know, spending more money on sending one person to volunteer somewhere than actually, you know, the activity on the ground is actually costing, for example. So there's a lot of things to think about.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I can see that there is still a lot of things to discuss connected to solidarity, volunteering, trends, changes, and there's also the aspect of climate change now popping up in the chat. So there would be much more to discuss. My role is a bit the boring timekeeper, so I will have to stop the very interesting thoughts and open the floor for everybody, maybe quickly. And yes, thanks for the discussion and the topics and the inputs in the chat, and the very interesting comments on a variety of concepts and topics, also provocative topics that are connected to solidarity and volunteering. So it is a huge topic, and there are various angles that you can think about. So I think there will be more to discuss on that. And maybe this, you were mentioning also the humanitarian aid at the end. So maybe as this will also be part of the next webinars, maybe this is a good linking moment to Barbara for rounding up. Please do not run away. I would really be happy for a short evaluation at the end, also for us for the webinar. But first of all, what is much more important, what's next and how to continue.
Yeah, what's next? I saw already some comments in the chat. Can we get the recording? Yes, we will make them available, but not right after the webinar. Please give us some time. We will also send you an email with a link list, those links which were shared in the chat, and also where to find opportunities. We will put them and collect them and send them out via email. And the Solidarity Month is not over, so we have 2 more webinars in case you have not registered yet and would still like to discuss. I can warmly invite you to the next one on the 13th of December on solidarity and service learning. Gabriela mentioned already, we have guests from Argentina because it's a concept which is outside of Europe, a bit more present than inside. We have Maria Nieves Tapia with us from Argentina and Pia Siles from the European Commission. So feel free to register. And we have a third and closing webinar on the 20th of December, so shortly before Christmas, celebrating solidarity, how we can tackle global problems together. And we have Amina Abdel Rahman Mohammed Said from UNW with us, and Pia Siles from the European Commission as well. So in case this seems interesting for you, please register also for these webinars and continue discussing with us, because it's very, very interesting and a topic which is not over, it seems. Yeah, thank you for your active contribution in the webinar. And I hand over to you, Elisabeth, for the evaluation.
Thank you, Barbara. So more topics, more interesting discussions to come. So hope to see some of you for the next weeks, the months of solidarity. Thanks again, Gabriela and Oliver, for the very interesting discussions and comments and remarks.